no play here, Bird. This is just one of the game's greatest players of all time.
Safe to say the kid get older. Forever gang, I'm never switching over. Made a lane and niggas can't get over. I can't mess with rappers, they be bogus. Rather get a pack and keep it open. Big dripper stand up in the ocean. Everybody trapping, we get lost. He ain't focused yet, but he ain't got motion. Made a half a ticket out promotion. Shout out switching sweet and keep me rolling. But if we get the out, we gotta slow. Ride around with Drake, like we OVO. I got some gas and I want some. Still got them pass in the hood, call it give and go. Keep a nigga, man, bitch in a figure four. Let me fuck when I want, I just come and go. Man, these rapping too deep for these skinny clothes. I might put me in him in some picture, bro. They look bro, hit this dick and start getting low. I spent time on the roots on the Lambo and
Yo, what's good with y'all, man? It's Yooooooo, and welcome back to the channel for another video. It's Yooooooo, and today we're going to be talking about some hoops. As y'all can see as the title of today's video, I'm about to be doing the Western Conference version of the clutchest playoff shots for every NBA franchise in NBA history. And if you've seen my last video, you already know the guidelines and stipulations that I'm going for when I go through the process of picking out these shots. So at the end of the day, same rules apply here, and let's just jump right into the video for the clutchest shots coming out of the Western Conference. If you guys enjoyed the video, by any means, hit the like button to show that you enjoyed, and subscribe to the channel if you're new, man. And if you ain't new, welcome back. You already know we get litty in this section. And for the first shot in today's video, we about to hop into our digital NBA time machine and set the date to April 23rd of 2019. Now, going back to 2019, it brings me some trauma to revisit this moment in Russell Westbrook's career, especially being an avid supporter of the man. I could just remember a lot of basketball conversations at this time amongst these two elite point guards of who was the best point guard right under Curry. And this was 2 years removed from when Westbrook won his MVP. And in 2019, Paul George was having himself probably one of the best seasons in his career when he was amongst the top candidates for MVP this season.
Yeah. I mean, that's a bad shot. Care what anybody says, that's a bad shot.
Consistently known for bringing the Portland Trailblazers to the NBA playoffs since his rookie season. And in the 2019 season, it was no different. With a solid second half stretch to close out the season, he managed to propel his team to a third seed in the Western Conference without another All-Star. Eliminated the OKC Thunder in the first round, dropping 50 points in this Game 5 and having one of the best playoff performances of all time. Hitting 10 of 18 of his threes on the night and having his 10th three of the game be a 37-foot bomb to close out the series. For Russ, on the other hand, and again, before I say this, Russ is my favorite player in the A. I will continue to remind niggas of that. But bro got shitted on. I ain't gonna, like, they ain't really fried him. The discrepancy in scoring efficiency and impact on winning between the two elite guards was at full display in this series and was showcased on the highest stage there is in the NBA. Portland Trailblazers being the underdogs and Damian Lillard and Westbrook having a little petty beef due to this point guard rivalry. It was nothing short of awe-inspiring to see the performance that Damian Lillard had in Game 5 and the waving fashion in which he sent the Thunder home after some serious trash talking throughout the series. And while Damian Lillard went on to set league history, becoming the first player in nearly 25 years at that point to score 50 points in a series-clinching game and set a new playoff career high and franchise record in the playoffs for points, later declaring in a post-game conference that that was the best game that he had potentially played in his career. He went on to eventually lead his team to as far as the conference finals, and in respect of Dame having one of the clutchest shots in Portland's history, we aren't going to discuss the results of that specific series, but let's just say that that conference finals was a clear indication of why him and Russ were fighting for the second best point guard in the NBA. For the Thunder, this was their 12th straight loss on the road in the playoffs and had become the third straight year that they lost in the first round. Overall in history, this shot and first round exit was responsible for OKC going into their rebuild phase and for them giving up on the core they were trying to build a championship around. Throughout the majority of Chris Paul's Hall of Fame career, he's been on the wrong side of some very clutch injuries if you're the opposing team. Almost every season of his career, especially in his prime, seemed to be riddled with an injury that came at a very untimely point in the season for whatever team he was playing for. While this same injury bug that has haunted Chris Paul through the majority of his career had came to bite him again in the 2015 postseason when he suffered a hamstring injury that he played through in the first round against the reigning champion San Antonio Spurs. This is the same hamstring injury that he had to deal with in the 2014 postseason, in which he made a similar decision to play in the first round against the Golden State Warriors in coincidentally another competitive 7-game series. But in this particular game, however, on May 2nd, 2015, Chris Paul would send the 6th-seeded San Antonio Spurs home on a game-winning one-legged floater over the legendary Tim Duncan. And if there's anything notable about the final moments after the shot, it's for one that Blake Griffin was about to fuck around and injure himself in the follow-up attempt, and that Chris Paul woke back to the timeout limping and grimacing. Even on a bum hamstring, that the man played 37 minutes in this game and put up an efficient 27 points on 69% from the field, 1 turnover on the entire night, and 6 assists. For the Memphis Grizzlies' clutchest shot in the playoffs of all time, we don't really gotta hop in the NBA time machine to really go back that far, as this shot took place in a playoff series less than a year ago today. This was a matchup between two of the best young NBA teams of the 2022 season. And even though it was a matchup between the 2nd seed and the 7th seed of the Western Conference, with the Minnesota Timberwolves making it through the play-in, and due to the lack of playoff experience from both of these young teams, it made for one of the most competitive first-round series in the Western Conference playoffs last year. Made this matchup even more electrifying is the fact that the best player from each of these teams are also the best players to watch posterize someone in the highlight reel, which further explains one of the craziest murder scenes we witnessed Ja Morant commit in Game 5 of this series, prior to him hitting one of the clutchest shots in his young career. In the final 7 seconds of this game, Anthony Edwards hits a contested corner 3 over Brandon Clark to tie the game up at 109, leaving 3.7 seconds on the clock for the Grizzlies to score on the other end. Possession, Anthony Edwards matches up with Ja Morant and does his best to stay with him off the ball, but gambles too hard on the steal, and Ja Morant cuts directly to the basket and finishes over Vanderbilt for the left-handed layup to get the lead. And with less than 1 second remaining on the clock and Towns missing the full court heave, this would give the Memphis Grizzlies the Game 5 victory and a 3-2 lead in the series, which would eventually lead to them winning the series overall in just 6 games and advancing to the second round of the playoffs. On May 20th of 1993, we would watch the reigning MVP Charles Barkley go against the former Defensive Player of the Year from the season prior and David Robinson face up in a matchup in the second round of the Western Conference playoffs. In this game, however, Charles Barkley would become the 2nd Phoenix Sun of all time to record a 20-20 performance in the NBA playoffs, aside from former Suns legend Connie Hawkins, who recorded a 34-point, 20-rebound game in the Game 2 of a second-round series against the Lakers in 1970. While Barkley would cap off an incredible and clutch performance with 28 points, 21 rebounds, 4 assists, and 4 steals. He would also hit the game-winning shot over David Robinson while faking like he was going to go inside, but creates enough separation for the 20-foot jumper, leaving 1.8 seconds on the clock and eventually closing out the series in just 6 games. In this same postseason, he would make his first and last finals appearance to face off against the Chicago Bulls, and that would become that franchise's 2nd appearance in the finals in NBA history. In 2012, which is better known for being the lockout season of the NBA, Kevin Durant and the OKC Thunder were faced with the very tallest of tasks that you could ask of a young and up-and-coming Western Conference team when it came to that year's postseason. Looking back, you could argue that they had one of the most challenging routes to the finals of the decade. Although they finished with the 2nd seed in the Western Conference, in the first round they went against the reigning champions in the Dallas Mavericks, where they managed to complete a sweep. And in the very next round of the same playoffs, they'd match up against the previous reigning champions in the LA Lakers, who were already battle-tested and were led by a prime Kobe Bryant, who were 2 years removed from 3 straight finals appearances and back-to-back title runs. And coincidentally, these were 2 teams that were responsible for eliminating Kevin Durant and the Thunder earlier on in his postseason career in 2010 and 2011. Kobe would lead both teams in the scoring department, averaging 31 points per game in this series on some pretty questionable efficiency. And on May 19th in Game 4 of this series, he would go off for 38 points in an attempt of tying this series up at 2 apiece. But that didn't put any fear in a young Kevin Durant's heart, as in Game 4 of this series, he hit one of the coldest, clutchest threes of his young career, giving them the 3-1 lead in this series, making quick work of the Lakers in this second round series, defeating them in a genuine sweep of 5 games, and having to get past the #1 seeded San Antonio Spurs in the conference finals to take OKC to their first NBA finals. In 1997, Charles Barkley would appear for the first time in his career as the bus rider instead of the bus driver of his own team when he went to Houston Rockets in hopes of winning a championship due to their prior success in the finals once Jordan decided to retire. One of the several downsides in Houston making this move for Barkley was the fact that they had traded away some of their depth in order to acquire him, and at the age of 33 years old and towards the end of his prime, would be joining a 34-year-old Clyde Drexler and Hakeem Olajuwon in hopes of making a deep push in the playoffs. And when it came to the postseason, they managed to compete all the way up until the Western Conference Finals, where they faced off against the #1 seeded Utah Jazz. May 25th, 1997, in Game 4 of this 6-game series, Eddie Johnson would hit a game-winning 3 that would tie the series up at 2 apiece and would send the Rockets back to Utah to compete to take the lead in the series in Game 5. And thanks to the mailman and the reigning MVP of this season, he would put on an incredible performance and carry his team to a Game 5 victory, where he would finish the game with 29 points and 14 rebounds. And in Game 6, his right-hand man, John Stockton, would hit the most clutch shot in his NBA career, where he hits a 3 at the top of the key right in Charles Barkley's face to send them to their first NBA Finals. And as you can tell by the emphatic celebration, also enjoy the taste of some sweet revenge.
Got it! Unbelievable! John Stockton! John Stockton! It's over! The Jazz win it! Utah goes to Chicago! Stockton hits the 3! It's over! The Jazz are coming to Chicago! They've won the West!
In the early 2000s, Kobe, Shaq, and the Lakers had become an unstoppable force to be messed with in the NBA postseason. In their first title run in 2001, not only did they sweep past the Sacremento Kings in the second round, but they also set an NBA all-time playoff record as a team, finishing that playoffs with the 15-1 record. 2002 playoffs with the Lakers looking just as dominant as the previous postseason, sweeping past their first-round matchup in the Portland Trail Blazers and defeating the San Antonio Spurs in just 5 games. Little did they know that they would run into their most formidable opponent in the Western Conference Finals against the Sacramento Kings. A top 5 offense, a newly acquired Mike Bibby at the point guard spot, and a team that held the best regular season record in the entire NBA and in their franchise's regular season history. From a roster talent and chemistry perspective, the 2002 Sacramento Kings had all the tools necessary for a championship team that season. But little did we know that as NBA fans, we would be running into the most rigged NBA playoff series of all time. There were calls throughout the entire 7-game series that were heavily made in the Lakers' favor, but even with the extreme levels of biased officiating, overall it didn't control the ultra competitiveness from these two teams in this series, as the highest margin of victory in 6 of the 7 games in this matchup was only 7 points. And in Game 4 of this series, Robert Horry would hit a game-winning shot to tie the series up at 2 apiece after Sacramento previously had led the series 2-1. In Game 5, however, Mike Bibby would get his get back in the best possible revenge for almost any NBA player. In Game 5, he would hit the go-ahead bucket in a dribble handoff with Chris Webber, which would eventually lead up to being the game winner and solidifying the W for the Sacramento Kings in Game 5, giving them back momentum and regaining control over the series, as the Game 5 victory would crystallize a 3-2 lead, even though holistically they would lose the series in 7 games. Given that this was arguably their best constructed roster and the deepest playoff run they've went in franchise history, I had no other choice but to declare this shot as the clutchest shot in their organization's playoff history. In 2008, the Denver Nuggets and the Detroit Pistons would pull off a blockbuster trade involving 2 elite NBA point guards from opposite conferences in Allen Iverson and Chauncey Billups. For Denver's perspective of the deal, the Iverson and Carmelo pairing wasn't working as well as they had hoped offensively, despite them putting up the number and box score statistics to say otherwise. But in terms of on-the-court flow and success in the playoffs, after 2 first-round exits in the Western Conference postseason, they seek to gain more of a well-rounded and defensive-minded pass-first point guard to pair alongside their rising star and 24-year-old Carmelo Anthony. And their answer to that equation was bringing in former champion and Finals MVP, 32-year-old Chauncey Billups. With that change, his impact on the roster was felt almost immediately, both in the regular season and in the postseason, as they had gone from being an 8th seed in the Western Conference the year prior to going all the way up to being a 2nd seed and making it to as far as the Western Conference Finals in the 2009 playoffs, where they were a first-round exit in both the seasons prior. And in only his 6th season in the NBA, not only would Carmelo Anthony go on to have the best postseason run of his young career, but he would also sink one of the clutchest shots in Nuggets playoff history in a 2nd-round series against the Dallas Mavericks. Late into the 4th quarter of Game 3, Dallas would hold a 2-point lead over Denver in the last 10 seconds of the game, and following a good one-on-one defensive possession from Kenyon Martin on Dirk, on the next shot attempt from Melo on what should have been a reach-in foul on Anthony Wright or a offensive foul on Melo. Instead, it would ultimately turn into a 3-point play that would give Denver not only the lead in this game, but a 3-0 lead in the series. Since the birth of the Minnesota Timberwolves franchise in 1990, the organization would suffer 7 consecutive first-round exits when it came to the NBA postseason, dating as far back as Kevin Garnett's sophomore season back in 1997, all the way up to his 7th year in the league in 2003. And that would all change for them in the 2004 season with the addition of Latrell Sprewell and Sam Cassell. With a much improved offense, not only would the franchise achieve their best regular season to this day, securing the best record in the Western Conference with a record of 58-24, and with Kevin Garnett being crowned the league's MVP and Sam Cassell making his first All-Star appearance this season, this team would make it as far as the conference finals when it came to the NBA playoffs, where they would match up against the Lakers. But they would also achieve their first playoff series victory as well, which against the Denver Nuggets. And in the next round, they would match up against the Sacremento Kings. And following an incredible performance from Kevin Garnett, who led both teams in points, rebounds, and blocks, he would finish his performance with 30 points, 15 rebounds, 5 blocks, and 3 steals and 3 assists, to go along with a clutch-ass bucket that would ice this Game 3 victory in an overtime thriller in Sacramento to give Minnesota the series lead when the series was previously tied at 1 apiece. Not to mention that the type of shot that bro hit to close out the game was already tough enough in itself when he manages to still hit the shot regardless of being fouled by Doug Christie off the spinoff and avoiding the block just nearly around the free throw line on the help side defense from Chris Webber. So when it comes to Golden State's clutchest playoff shot of all time, I've found myself running into the same dilemma that I had in my last video with the Eastern Conference when it came to Giannis and Kareem for Milwaukee's clutchest playoff shot. However, this time around, the decision comes down to either that cool-ass, smooth-ass pull-up 3 that Kevin Durant hit in LeBron's grill in his first championship run with the Golden State Warriors, or one of the performances that was a leading contributor in Kevin Durant leaving OKC in the first place, Game 6 Klay. With the odds stacked higher against Golden State than ever before, Klay Thompson would perform one of the greatest shooting performances we've ever seen from a marksman in NBA history, where he lit the OKC Thunder up for 41 points, hitting 11 three-pointers on the night, and that is with them being down 8 points going into the 4th quarter of this Game 6 in OKC, where Klay exploded for 19 points in the 4th quarter alone. Not to mention that with this performance and Golden State's victory in the series over OKC would make them the 3rd team in NBA history to ever come back from a 3-1 lead in the conference finals, before, you know, they became the first team to choke a 3-1 lead in the finals. But I'm going to still take Game 6 Klay, though, in this decision. You feel what I'm saying? Let's just get to the next shot. In the 2011 postseason, with a lot of behind-the-scenes tension going on between Dallas and Miami in the final series of that playoffs, Dirk was battling a sinus infection for the majority of that series. And prior to the tip-off of Game 5, LeBron and D-Wade's reaction to the news went a little something like...
man.
Weather, right?
It's hard to go from 85-degree weather and then go to 90. Messing with you.
With this clip seemingly mocking Dirk's illness, combined with the pre-existing tension between Dirk and Wade from the controversial officiating of the 2006 NBA Finals, in the media and post-game conferences, Dirk would handle any comments related to Dwayne Wade and the situation in a professional manner, downplaying the idea of the events adding to any extra incentive to win the series. But hey man, me personally, I ain't buying it. And while I won't ever downplay the idea of it being a team effort to win an NBA championship, Dirk was on a mission in this 2011 finals. And going back to June 2nd of 2011, in Game 2 of this series, he would hit the game-winning layup that would give them the win in Game 2 and tie the series at 1 apiece following a loss to Miami in Game 1. The Dallas Mavericks would go on to win the series in 6 games, leading Dirk to his first championship and not only one of the biggest blemishes on LeBron's amazing career resume, but also helped set the example of being an iconic, legendary lone superstar and leading his team to a championship despite getting it out the mud by the same franchise who drafted him to the NBA. Off the heels of a 31-point blowout in Game 4 by the defending champs, on June 19th of the 2005 NBA Finals, in a matchup between the San Antonio Spurs and the Pistons, Big Shot Rob would make his appearance and live up to his nickname on this play, where he hits a very clutch shot in the midst of the Spurs championship run this season, in a heated 7-game series. But on a basketball note, my confusion with this play, especially with the Pistons being remembered as one of the greatest defensive teams, why would Sheed Wallace leave Robert Horry and rush to trapping Manu Ginobili, who was 0 for 4 from 3 and overall was shooting 5 for 16 from the field on the night, understandably being the second or third best player on this Spurs team. But Robert Horry was the second leading scorer in this game and was already shooting 4 for 5 from 3 prior to this shot. I don't know what Sheed had on his mind, or if he was just thinking about some other shit, didn't see Tayshaun closing out, who was also one of the better perimeter defenders on this roster, but in all, it costed them this Game 5. Spurs would go on to close the series out in 7 games and win their 3rd championship in just 6 seasons, while the Pistons would make their last appearance in the finals to this day, but at least can rest easy with knowing they pulled off one of the greatest upsets the year prior. In the Houston Rockets' most clutch shot in playoff history, it is also accompanied by one of the biggest choke jobs in the NBA playoffs and would be demonstrated in Game 1 of the Orlando Magic's first appearance in the NBA Finals in franchise history. However, this meltdown would cause one of the craziest domino effects in Orlando Magic's history and couldn't have occurred at a worse time, as they were facing off against the Houston Rockets, who were the defending champions. On June 6th of 1995, Nick Anderson of the Orlando Magic, who was known to be a semi-reliable free throw shooter, shooting 70% at the free throw line that same season, would go on to miss 4 straight free throws, with even just one of them being necessary to give the Orlando Magic a 2-possession lead with less than 10 seconds in the 4th quarter of Game 1. And on the following offensive possession for Houston, Kenny Smith would not only tie the franchise record in 3-pointers made in a playoff game, but he also broke the record a month prior and would tie the game up to send it into overtime, finishing the game shooting 7 of 11 from 3 and also having 23 points to go along with 9 assists. And while Dennis Scott would hit a very clutch 3-pointer to tie the game up in the final seconds of the first overtime, Hakeem Olajuwon would get an even clutcher bucket off of the layup miss, which would win them the game and would play a pivotal part in the domino effect that led up to their back-to-back championship run, winning the series in a sweep, and the dismembership of the Orlando Magic eventually in the years to come. In a crucial Game 4 of a legendary Lakers-Celtics matchup in the 1987 Finals, this game was very necessary for the defending champs to escape with the W in order to tie the series, and it almost seemingly looked like they were going to do so, as they would go up 16 points in the 3rd quarter, and even for the majority of the 4th quarter, they would hold a comfortable lead over the Lakers, leading by 8 points with 3.5 minutes to go in the quarter. And even in the heat of battle, Magic Johnson would injure his left knee on the collision, bumping knees with Larry Bird late into the game. But later into this game 4, Magic Johnson would hit a shot that would make you even forget that the incident even happened. However, fast forwarding to the final 20 seconds of this fourth quarter, with the Lakers holding a 1-point lead and good ball movement from the Boston Celtics, the ball will find Larry Bird to the left-hand corner, and he will drain his second 3 on the night, giving the Boston Celtics a 2-point lead. On the following possession after a timeout, the Lakers would feed Kareem in the post in hopes of him being able to tie the game, but instead would get fouled on the attempt, and with the chance to at least send this game potentially to overtime, he would miss the second free throw, and fortunately for him and the Lakers, they would regain possession on a struggle for the rebound off of the Celtics. Without wasting the second opportunity, Magic will get the ball with 5 seconds left in the game, ignoring the post-up action for Kareem, would hit the classic skyhook in traffic to give the Lakers this lead in Game 4 en route of his 4th NBA championship, and in his first season as the league's reigning MVP, as opposed to his rival Larry Bird, who had won the award 3 straight seasons in the year prior. Not only was Larry Bird and the Boston Celtics the defending champions, but they also had the last laugh in the infamous rivalry between the Lakers in their last finals matchup in the '84 finals, where the Celtics beat them in 7 games. But eventually, revenge would be only but so sweet for Magic Johnson, as he was at this point sitting on his 4th NBA championship, eventually retiring with the last laugh, as he would win him and Bird's last finals matchup in 6 games, and would end his career with a total of 5 championships, beating the same team that eliminated the Boston Celtics in the same postseason in the following year by the Detroit Pistons. And even for as great and clutch as Larry Bird and Magic Johnson was at the peak of their career, what they should be remembered for the most is for capping off such an iconic rivalry with a legendary hook.